which is perhaps one of the farthest regions of this country from the capital, and largely agricultural and reliant on weather, which is part of climate. And as part of my earlier life, I witnessed extremes of weather. During drought, it got warmer, hotter if you like, and during rainy season sometimes gets wet, and sections of the land that was originally dry starts to sog and develop swamps and so on. So that's, and then the disruptions to the food systems and the crops and the infrastructure are things that I've witnessed over time in increasing levels. Just so you know, from the time that I first crossed River Nile at Pakwach coming to Kampala, and subsequently, I've never seen that place flood as it started flooding about 5 years ago. So you see Pakwach Bridge almost being submerged, and that's unusual for that part of the country. So you've seen some, if you like, weather or climatic episodes develop over time, and it becomes apparent that the climate is changing. We've also seen other parts of the country. I got my first job in Bundibujo district. I was living in Nyahuka, a few kilometers from the DRC border. There were landslides, but I'd never heard about River Nyamwamba. But increasingly, like every other year, there's it's bursting its banks. I have also lived in Kampala for a very long time. I have learned, especially in 2020, that the level of Lake Victoria rose and it covered the road going to Entebbe. This year in May, I learned that it hit the record in history, that the highest level of the lake in history was this year. Clearly, there's something that is happening, which is climate is changing. Heat waves from March, I think from February, March, April this year was unbearable. And we've seen similar things in the northeastern part, Karamoja. We've seen the basin of Lake Chiuga and multiple other episodes that we're seeing, increasingly landslides in the Elgon and so on. So in our country, we can comfortably say that climate is changing. Coming from a farming background, where my parents were involved in agriculture, it matters to me if the produce is not yielding the way it does because of disruptions, and when this is happening quite often. But secondly, Action Aid, the employer that I am with right now, focuses on issues of poverty. Our work is really to end poverty. We're working with people living in poverty and who are facing injustice to overcome that. And we are deep in the communities, rooted, working with farmer groups, working with women, working with children, and this is what we encounter on a day-to-day basis. And we see people whose own source of livelihood on a piece of land that is barely able to sustain them disappear. They can't diversify, they do not have cash, and we see this increasingly affecting them. So the efforts that we're making to move them out of poverty is going backwards, largely because of weather patterns, largely because it affects their source of livelihood on a day-to-day basis. So this means a lot for us relating to our mission as an organization to work with people living in poverty and move them out of poverty and injustice. And climate change is one such systemic issue that we're dealing with.
You had a climate justice solidarity march in May.
Sure.
How did that go? What was it about?
It went really well, and we got a lot of feedback around it. So what it was about is that we want to turn the chapters on the conversations around climate change in this country, and together with other Action Aid affiliates globally, I think we also want to turn that conversation globally. First is that most times there's a lot of rhetoric. Part of that rhetoric is in the language. Climate change language is so complex. People are talking big English, loss and damage, there are acronyms that will make even the most educated bite their tongue and so on. We want to break that down. We want to break that down to the lives of people. What do you mean when you say loss and damage? What do you mean when you say climate change? Is climate changing? There are people who are denying that there is climate change. So we want to move away from rhetoric and break down into absorbable bits what climate change is. And climate change to a smallholder farmer in Amuru, in Katakwi, in Karamoja, in Bundibujo. What does climate change mean to them on a day-to-day basis? So part of it is really was to get those community members, tell their story of what climate change means to them on a day-to-day basis, how it impacts their life, but also most importantly, how they are struggling and really standing resilient to climate change. What adaptation measures are they really getting to that they can demonstrate? How are they able to live with the support of different actors in government, in civil society, in private sector, and community systems? We want them to tell that story. But tell that story to what end? We want to amplify those voices and then to say that let the resources of government of Uganda and all other funders, banks, multinational financial institutions, be moved away from activities that pollute our environment, that cause climate change, because there is a lot of contribution from man's activity. We move those resources away to activities that actually help us to build resilience to climate change. And there is a lot of money moving in the wrong direction in this country and globally. We want us as humans to reprioritize. And so we said the theme was from words to action. Put your money where your mouth is. That was the theme of our climate justice march and symposium.
So, in your own words, Xavier, what is climate change?
Climate change is basically a long-term variation in climate over time that is impacting and shifting the parameters of what we are used to. When I say long term, it's measured scientifically, I think 20, 30 years time. So you've seen patterns of rain change. If you had rain this year and next year you didn't have, that's not climate change. That's a variation in the weather. But if you're having a pattern where the rains used to come between February and April, and for the last 10 years you're seeing that the rains are delaying, or that pattern that was known is disrupted, then you know that that is changing, but it is traced over a long period of time. The Uganda Meteorological Authority has actually data that points to different parts of this country that has changes in the weather pattern tracked over a very long period of time, whether it's in Kabale, which used to be, you know, the Switzerland of Uganda, and mosquitoes would not live there. Now we're having some of the growing incidences of malaria in Kabale. Tells you that there is something that is going on wrong. Or you go into Bugisu, coffee growing area, corn growing area, and you're finding that some of the diseases that used not to be reported on the maize or on the coffee is increasingly there. And then you know that there is a change in that pattern. And as I said, it is measured over a long period of time. So that is what climate change is and needs to be presented as such. There is a conceptual clarity that we need to make people understand. Otherwise, we can conflate things and we start to talk about things that are not, or we give ammunition to people who deny that there's climate change. So I think we owe the communities a service to break it down and say we can actually demonstrate how things have changed over a long period of time.
You, as ActionAid, you engage heavily with farmers, you said, and you engage with them to adopt scalable solutions to address the negative effects of climate change. How have you seen climate change impact agriculture with the farmers that you've interfaced with?
It's in major ways. So we work with small-scale farmers, as I said. They are Uganda's biggest proportion of farming, and largely to address issues of livelihood. It's for food. Most of the needs of the people living in poverty is food, primarily. And they want just to have predictable food supply. And then they come to income of how they can sell the surplus to maybe send children to school, to buy clothing, and other necessities. That's what they're doing. So we've seen over time people who are trying to piece together a livelihood to have food security. That is disrupted when there is a weather episode or a pattern that they are used to is disrupted. So the livelihoods, find somebody who is piecing their lives with their families and coming and building certain income, putting children to school. When that is disrupted, they go back to zero. So they continue to sit on the margins, falling back into abject poverty increasingly. It is failing the efforts of moving people out of poverty. So we're seeing that happen. We're seeing people who are, they get to a place where they cannot now diversify their incomes. So one, the disruption to the agricultural practices that it means. Two, the even movement, a place like Katakwi, which when it floods, the housing patterns are disrupted. People have to move away. So even traveling around is difficult. You find canoes at play, and then the grass-thatched houses, they are submerged in water. They have to be displaced and losing their own social settings and safety nets. That's what they are. So if something happens to me, I usually rely on my family or the extended family. But when there is displacement, now you go to Bududa, a section of the family has been displaced to Chiriandongo because of the landslides. It means that that safety net that naturally existed is no longer there. And I have to fend for myself. If it is not there, I'm at the verge of literally survival, if not death. So those are some of the disruptions that we see. Important for us is that people are losing their own sovereignty, food sovereignty, and which is really important. Where poor people are, where systems of risk mitigation are really weakest in this part of the world, it means that there are means of adaptations that are ingrained in our culture, in our tradition. People had granaries, they would store their millet and groundnuts and beans and so on. So those adaptation measures, they are disrupted, and they now become dependent on the market. And remember, money is not in circulation in most of this country. And you can't have it if you can't produce agriculturally or have anything to exchange to earn the money and to buy the food. And so that dependence on the market for food when you are yourself living a subsistence life is a challenge. And so we're seeing that climate change pushes people continually to depend on the market, yet they are not accustomed to the market. We work in Nebi district, general West Nile, but the bigger Nebi district, Pakwach, Nebi, Zombo, we work in that area. Increasingly, when droughts come, a lot of crops are destroyed during the dry season. And then you find that the maize gardens, they are withering, and yet the family depends a lot on the maize so that they can sell some of it for livelihood. And when they are not able to get the yields that can help to sustain them, it means that they have to resort to other ways of getting the livelihood. Where are they going to get food from? They'll start to look for either odd jobs to do work, to be able to get money to buy food. So they're living from hand to mouth. And when that happens, they were expecting a surplus from maize to be able to sell and send children to school. The children are dropping out of school, and the families are not able to sustain them in school. And so we're seeing a lot of that happening. But Nebi is a fertile area. It's a place that grows, but increasingly faced with climate change issues or weather variability. You'll see disruptions in livelihoods, and you find people increasingly going down. And Zombo, very fertile area, accessible to the DRC, fine coffee grown there, even tea now, and maize, and lots of other crops growing there. But the roads are inaccessible during the wet season. Trailers and trailers are pushed on the sides of the road, and is basically you can't access the market. The beautiful food produced is rotting away on the roadside. It can't go anywhere. So it's not just affecting the livelihoods directly, it's affecting infrastructure and transport. You can't get goods from the city, manufactured goods, you can't get your goods to the market so as to earn. And so that's a loss to the community. And so for as long as climate change is with us and we're not prepared to address those effects, having roads that can be motorable, can bring goods, farm products to the market, it is a challenge.
Xavier, are there stories of resilience that you have? It feels like a very dark picture all around.
Interestingly, we do have stories of resilience, we do. And our stories of resilience for us is also built around how do communities, with the support from different actors, how do they piece themselves up and come through in such moments. As ActionAid, we are, if I can bring it out here, we are engaged in working with communities on issues of agroecology. Agroecology is basically to say that we recognize that climate change is here with us, but we know that there are farming practices, agroeconomic practices, that will help to regenerate nature and make it productive, and help the farmers to diversify their sources of income or their means of production. That is also cyclic, so that you can have, for example, rare rabbits, which are really on growing demand, very nutritious. But besides the rabbits, for meat, a rabbit urine is actually a good source of fertilizer, natural fertilizer, not chemical, manufactured synthetic fertilizer. And just within that small piece of land, you can get rabbit urine, you can grow vegetables, you can grow fruits around there. And so when it is dry season, and you can use a little bit of irrigation, when the soil is not that fertile, you can apply some of the natural manure or fertilizers, and you're able to increase yields, meet the food needs of the family, and sell some of this to be able to earn an income. So, but we seldom address ourselves to the small-scale farmers, smallholder farmers, who themselves can actually produce to feed themselves, and if supported well, they can actually access the market with natural, organic foods without endangering the environment that they're producing from. and there's a lot of this going on. In Nebi, we started a small, what we call Center for Excellence for Agroecology, working with about 5 groups. That group has grown to 500 households that are coming to learn and extend to their own yards and producing. We have a similar one in Amuru, we have one in Katakwi, we have one in Kumi. And when we see this going on, it's changing lives, and they are doing it independently. It's not dependent on Action Aid. We catalyze that process, and then you find the communities taking it up and going. As a result of that, government of Uganda has looked at the work that we're doing, has invited us to be part of the agroecology strategy for this country. We've been working on developing it, and our goal is that to influence government of Uganda to actually put that into a law, and so that it can receive public funding. And as I started, we can get money moving in the right direction. We can get funding, public funding, to smallholders to do agroecology, which helps to regenerate nature rather than endangering and amplifying climate change.